Welcome to this week's Authors Love Readers podcast, where we delve into the stories behind the stories. We're asking authors questions, some of them fun, some of them serious, and from their answers, you're going to learn things you never knew about the people who write the stories you love. My name is Patricia McLinn. I'm your host and designated question asker.
I'm Steven Womack, and I'm an author who loves readers.
Now, let's start the show. Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of Authors Love Readers podcast. Really interested today to have Steven, officially, that's his writing name, Womack, also know him as Steve Womack, visiting us today because I don't know him very well, except we have something in common besides writing, in that we are both past presidents of Novelists, NINK. And the regular listeners to the podcast have heard Novelists, NINK before, because that's how a lot of our guests have come to Authors Love Readers podcast. So let's start off, Steve, with you telling us a little bit about what you write.
Thanks, Pat, and I'm delighted to be here. It's a real pleasure. I've been looking forward to this. I write primarily mysteries. I didn't start out to write mysteries. This happened a long time ago. I just wanted to write novels. I live in the South, and my first career aspiration was to be an important Southern writer. The problem is that those jobs were already taken. So I finally, after about 15 years of collecting rejection slips, sold a book, a novel, which I thought was a novel of Southern politics, to St. Martin's Press. And my editor decided it was a mystery. And I didn't even see the book until the UPS truck delivered a box of them to my house. And I opened it up, and the cover read, "Murphy's Fault, a Mystery." And I went, okay, I guess I'm a mystery writer.
Was there a dead body in it?
No. Well, there was in the book, yes. But
not in the box.
Not in the box.
So how did that then change your subsequent books?
Well, I went back to contract. That first book, it, like a lot of first novels, didn't sell particularly well, but it got some good reviews. And then at the end of the year, it was the only first mystery on the New York Times Notable Book List. And that got my editor's attention. And I said, well, can we go back and do this again? And she said, yes, but this time, can we make it a little more of a classical mystery? There was a murder in the first book, but it wasn't really a murder mystery. It was really a novel of Southern politics. I'd been a newspaper reporter in New Orleans, so I was sort of
a Times-Picayune.
Well, at the time I lived in New Orleans, there were 3 daily newspapers.
Wow.
There was the Times-Picayune and the States Item, and then I worked for the worst and the smallest one, the New Orleans Daily Record, and learned a lot there and got a lot of experience.
And doesn't the smaller newspaper lets you do so much more?
Oh, yes. I basically, this newspaper was so small that I went to work as a reporter, and 10 months later was the city editor. Because the guy above me had quit. And, but I was getting, sometimes 5 or 6 bylines a day.
Oh my gosh.
It was a lot of fun. So anyway, after I went back with, the editor was Ruth Cavin, who's a very famous mystery writer.
Legendary.
Yes, legendary, who passed away about a decade ago. But Ruth said, I'll do it again, but give me more of a mystery this time. And I said, okay, no problem. And then I hung up the phone with her and went, oh, what do I do now? I don't know how to write mysteries. So I went out and read a grocery sack full of them and became a real fan and started writing them.
Can you remember of those books that you read at that point where you thought, oh yeah, okay, this I can do, and this I really like?
There were 2 of them that I had not read much of before that really bowled me over. And the first was, of course, Raymond Chandler. He's the American, the 20th century American mystery writer who really made mysteries, the first guy to really make mysteries like literature. He was that good. And I read virtually everything that I could get on Chandler. And then, of course, the other one was John D. MacDonald. And I got introduced to the Travis McGee books, all 26 of which I have sitting on the shelf behind me in my home office now.
Oh, that's cool. That's neat. Okay. So we're going to hit into some of the getting to know you questions. And let's start with, have you had surprising jobs?
I, like a lot of writers who've struggled to get published and were just trying to pay the bills, I had a lot of sort of weird jobs. But I think the one that I had the longest, in the late 70s, I moved to New York City. I lived in Manhattan, and I wanted to work in publishing, and I applied to a publisher, and the only job they had open was working in public information. So I wrote news releases for a while, and I got bored with that. And they started an in-house art department, and they posted a job for a typesetter. And I went into my boss and I said, I'd like to apply for that job. I'd like to get a transfer and go to work for the art department. And she said, have you ever set type before? And I lied. I said, yes, done it all the time. And she said, okay, you can have the job. So I went upstairs where they had just installed a new CompuGraphic edit writer. That's how long ago this was. And I looked around and said, where's the user's manual? And I spent the next decade setting type for 2 or 3 different companies.
Why did you want to do that?
Do you know, I fell into it. I'm kind of a nerd anyway. I love the technology. And this was when cold type, photo typesetting was really just coming into being. And it was an amazing technology. And there was a lot of math involved. And I just fell into it. And oddly enough, it's paid off. Because like many of the writers that you've talked to, I'm now independently publishing books as well as traditionally. And I typeset my own books now. I typeset probably 400 books in my past life as a typesetter.
Wow.
So the skills transferred pretty easily.
Well, that is really cool. And another aspect of I'm thinking journalism, which is my background, but very seldom is that people who work in both of those aspects. It's usually the people who work in the production or the people who work in the newsroom, and don't cross too much.
They usually don't. But I always thought it gave me a kind of an insight into the process that proved useful. I did paste up for years too. I mean, typesetters, you do paste up. I can't say I was a graphic designer. I don't have any sense of design, but back in the days when you physically cut and pasted galleys into flats, I did that along with my typesetting, and it gave me a just sort of an insider's view of how print media was put together. And it helped.
How do you feel it helps?
I had an understanding, especially when I started publishing my own books a few years ago, and I've published a couple of other books by other writers, but it gave me a sense of how design, especially covers, sell books. What appeals to a reader, what catches their eye. And of course, I would never, ever, ever try to design my own covers, but I still knew, I think, what a good cover looked like. And that was what I mostly got out of it. It's a real split personality kind of thing, though.
It is very much. And yet I was thinking, I often talk with readers about, like, when you ask readers, please consider leaving a review, I often say, just share your reading experience. And the type, and the layout, the physical layout of the book is so vital to that reading experience, and yet mostly subliminal, I think.
Yes. Yeah. It is. But I was in the Target the other day. My wife was shopping for something, so I went back to the book section to browse, and And I don't do that as much as I used to, just browse bookshelves.
Mm,
But I had heard on the NINK list and talking to other writers that the mass market paperback is about dead, the traditional mass market paperback. And of course, that's true. I mean, the most paperback books that I see on the shelves at Target, Walmart, places like that are not traditional mass market paperbacks. They're all
hmm.
sorts of different sizes now. And I think what it is we have an aging population. So the type in mass market paperbacks is awfully small.
Yes.
And so the book design, the way that the books are physically presented, the way that content's physically delivered has a real impact on whether or not a reader's going to pick it up these days. And of course, as I mentioned, the importance of having the right cover and the right title is critical.
All these things that are not really associated with the actual writing or the story that you're telling, that bolster it, support it.
Absolutely. And as you well know, and all the writers that you interview on this podcast know, the days when you could, sit alone in your garret and type out a masterpiece onto a turn it into a manuscript and deliver it to a publisher, and then your job is done. Those days are long gone.
Yeah.
Every writer needs to think of themselves as an entrepreneur. You need to learn the business. You need to learn how it works, and it's really you've got to re-educate yourself if you're going to survive in this business these days.
So what first brought you to the idea of wanting to tell stories? Can you point to a book or a childhood experience?
Yeah, when I was a teenager, I, through a chain of events that are too long to go into right now, wound up getting a scholarship to an all boys boarding school in Ohio. And it was a program that took kids out of sort of lower middle class homes and sent them off to places like Phillips Andover and Choate and Cranbrook. And I went to a fine school that I'm still very attached to, Western Reserve Academy up in Ohio. And it was the difference between this and public school. I was running with the big kids now. And I had an English teacher my sophomore year who told us that we were going to read Robert Penn Warren's All the King's Men. And we were going to read 25 pages of it a night till we finished the book. And we all thought he was, out of his mind. This was the longest book I'd ever seen in my life. And we all thought he was crazy. And I went back to my dorm room that night and sat down and opened up this book that should have been sold by the pound. And, and I started reading it, and I was just sucked into the world of this book
Oh.
that I don't know how many people have read it, if you've read it, but it's again a story of Louisiana politics. It's loosely inspired by or based on the life of Huey Long,
Mm.
and I read the book. It's like 600 or 700 pages, and I read it in 3 days, and then turned around and opened it to page 1 and read it again, and
Wow.
nothing's ever been the same. It was the book that turned me into a writer. And at the end of it, I remember thinking to myself, this is what I want to do. I want to create worlds like this and suck people into them and just take them over. and so that's what I've been trying to do ever since.
That's fantastic. It's interesting too because a lot of us reacted really strongly to stories very early
Mm-hmm.
and didn't realize that people could do this. So you had that immediate epiphany where I think some of the rest of us were a little slower that you can do this for a living or you can be involved in this as opposed to books just appearing.
Right. And of course, the problem was that, at that point, I think I was 16 years old. I decided I wanted to be a writer. I started my first novel at 18. And of course, I didn't have any idea what I was doing. So,
Yeah.
at that age, you don't have the life experience. You don't have the writing experience. You haven't paid your dues. So, I spent the next 15 years um, writing unpublished novels and hundreds of newspaper articles and, just learning the craft.
What do you think being a journalist has brought to your fiction writing?
Oh boy, a lot. For one thing, I learned how to write fast. I mean, you literally, when you're a journalist and you're doing this every day, I spent some time as a writer, the title was field editor for United Press International back in the 70s. And I went to work at 6 o'clock in the morning and sat down at a workstation in a room full of workstations with clattering type and noise and distractions everywhere. And the bureau chief had set a stack of local newspapers on my desk in front of this monitor, and I sat down at 6 o'clock in the morning after one cup of coffee and spent the next 8 hours rewriting local news stories in UPI style and putting them out over the network. You learn how to write fast, you learn how to write clean, you learn how to write leanly. I was beginning as a journalist to get a sense of how stories should be structured. That took me a lot longer. In fact, I had another pivotal event in my development as a writer, 15 or 20 years later, when I took my first screenwriting course, which is, film is very structured, but you learn how to write fast. You certainly don't wait for inspiration. That whole artistic waiting for inspiration in the muse thing. No, you put your butt in the chair and you put your keys on the fingers, your fingers on the keys, and it's the Nike theory, just do it.
The one additional thing that I found was dialogue for me, because I started as a sports writer, reporter, and the ability to hear how distinct people's speech was, I feel very definitely came from journalism, and translates to the fiction writing really well.
Yeah, and for me, it was, first of all, I was able to, there's a certain amount of mimicry going on here. You're just trying to write like somebody else sounds in dialogue. And for me, the other thing was I learned, and I still try to teach my students this, good story dialogue. You can't just transcribe everyday conversations. If you do that, then your dialogue's going to wander all over the place. It's going to be unfocused. It's not going to have any firepower. So you have to learn how to write good story dialogue that sounds like ordinary, spontaneous, run-of-the-mill talk.
I have a good friend who started a journalism career at the City News Bureau in Chicago. And right out of college, she started, and she did some work with the original Mayor Daley. And if they got really angry at him, they quoted him accurately because he would ramble and and things didn't make sense. When you wrote a story to try to make sense, you had to ellipsize him. I think I just made that word up, and give it give it some shape, because what he said didn't have any natural shape. I always thought that was the greatest revenge. Quote him accurately
and it gives you some editing skills.
Yes, that's the truth too.
Rewriting.
Yes, to find in this morass to find what you really wanted. So maybe that helps us too in writing fiction. So let's hit some of the easy stuff. What's your favorite taste?
When I saw your list of questions, I thought, I'm not even sure, but I know I tend.
So not an easy one. Sorry about that.
I've got a sweet tooth like everybody else, but I really think the tastes I'm more drawn to tend towards sour. I like sour kids candy. I like lemonade. And I don't know what that is, but a taste that makes you pucker up a little bit. I find myself, going to the drugstore or the grocery store and buying a bag of sour bubble gum,
and okay. That's
and
cool.
kids candy
And
like
see, this was a
nerds.
self-revelation.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a favorite color?
Blue. And I've known that for years. I've just been drawn to the color blue because it's cool, it's soothing, but also for some shades of blue, you can see kind of an underlying passion and heat to it. Reds are over the top for me. Brilliant oranges and reds. I tend to go toward the cool colors.
I have my very own desert island, and it has very strange rules. So it will let you play a movie. It has the facilities too to play a movie, but only 3 movies. So you're going to see 3 movies over and over and over, and you're going to be on this desert island a long time. Which 3 movies are you going to pick?
Okay, Romancing the Stone might be one of them. And the other 2 would be, seriously, Casablanca. Michael Curtiz directed it in 1944. And Casablanca, and then a 1972 movie that not that many people have heard of. It was directed by Arthur Hill and written by Patty Chayefsky. And it was one of the movies that George C. Scott did the year after he turned down the Oscar for Patton. And it's a movie called The Hospital. And it was George C. Scott and Diana Rigg. And I literally I bet I've seen that movie 25 times.
What about it makes you want to watch it over and over?
Well, for one thing, it's set in a hospital in Manhattan in the 70s, and the hospital is falling apart. And you look at it today and you realize that even 45, 50 years ago, the American healthcare system was a mess. And it's still a mess, and it's only gotten worse since then. But also, George C. Scott plays a disaffected, depressed middle-aged man who has a lot of responsibility, but a lot of problems, and he struggles in personal relationships. He struggles in his work. At the beginning of the movie, he's having a nervous breakdown. And there's just something about that character that I identify with. It just rings true to me. And at the end of the movie, he falls in love with a young Diana Rigg, and they're going to run off. They're going to leave, and he's going to go out to Arizona with her and live on a Native American reservation and be a doctor to poor people. And in the end, he decides that his responsibilities at the hospital trump everything. And he, at the last minute, decides to stay. And there's just something about that movie that just from the moment I saw it stayed with me.
Okay, here's a question from a reader, and then I want to add something to the end of it. She asks, where do your stories come from? And she says she knows an author who dreams her stories and another one who has characters suddenly taking up residence. And so she's curious about where our beautiful, as she says, beautiful stories come from. And I'm also curious about when you have a story idea, do you know from the outset whether it's a novel idea, a short story idea, or a film idea?
Yeah, I usually know pretty well from the get-go what form the story's going to take. And I've published a novelization of a screenplay, and then I've turned several other of my own books and other books into screenplays. So I'm pretty comfortable moving back and forth from one medium to the other. And so, yeah, I pretty much know. I've only published 3 short stories in my life. The short story is not the form I'm most comfortable with. I appreciate them. I love them, but it's not the form that I sort of naturally fall into. Now, as far as where ideas come from, my students ask me that a lot. I get students who say, I've got writer's block, I can't come up with an idea. And it's hard for me to answer that question because I've never had that. I mean, I can't say I've ever been blocked. There've been times when I'm tired or drained. But to me, ideas are everywhere. They come at you like swarms of crazed bats.
I
And
like that
the
image.
challenge is, oh, they're swarming at you.
And then they sit in your head and they won't leave.
They won't go away. And the challenge for a lot of writers, I think, is not where do my ideas come from, but which ones are worth putting the effort into developing and writing as a book. And that's, filtering through the ideas. But they come everywhere. I moved to Nashville from New York City a long time ago, and I was still in book publishing. And we have here in Nashville what was then the world's largest Bible publisher. I didn't go to work there because I was a missionary or on a theological mission. I went to work there because they had an art department and they hired me to run it. So this is the world's largest Bible publisher. And I'm driving down I-40 to go to work one day. And at 2nd Avenue, 4th Avenue exit, they put up a billboard. This was in the late 80s, and it's still there. The billboard's still there. World's largest adult bookstore, exit here. And I thought to myself, I'm on my way to work at the world's largest Bible publisher, and I just passed the world's largest adult bookstore. There's a story here. And that became my novel, Chain of Fools, which I have, thanks, now that I'm publishing independently, I have reverted the title back to its original title that I liked, but my editor didn't. It's now called Nobody's Chain Lays Straight. And it's, I got a novel from a billboard. So I tell my students, it's being open to the universe. It's letting go. And of course, a lot of students and younger writers, they get writer's block because they're clutching, they're trying too hard. And they get anxious. They're afraid that they'll do something and it won't be as good as they want it to be. And so I tell them, a lot of this, we're making stuff up.
Yeah.
And that's supposed to be fun. And so try to approach it as play. Let your imagination run wild. Nobody knows what's going on inside your head, so let it go anywhere it wants. And that's the brainstorming, and just come up with ideas. And of course, the other option is somebody asked me at a book signing, where do you get your ideas? And I don't know whether I was in the mood to be a smartass or what, but I said, Dixie Plot Works, Birmingham, Alabama. They've been supplying story ideas for over 75 years now.
I'm often in the mood to be a smartass, so I might have to steal that one.
Dixie Plot Works.
Oh, dear. Part of me wants to ask how you decide which ideas are worth the effort to go into.
Yeah, it's usually the ones that haunt you.
Oh.
It's the ones that you can't stop thinking about. Once it takes up enough of your headspace, it takes over.
So basically, it's writing as self-defense.
Yes.
Preserving some shred of sanity.
Trying to.
How do you then go from that idea that won't let you alone and shape it, turn it into a book that somebody is a story that somebody's going to read?
Well, a lot of it, and I know this is going to sound simplistic, but when I'm teaching my intro screenwriting students and my creative writing students how to do this, I tell them, you build a story pretty much the same way you build a house. The first thing you got to do is figure out where the hell you're going to put it. You got to have a lot. You got to have a piece of ground to put it on. And then you lay the foundation. And the foundation of a story is the broad outline. I got to know the premise. I got to know who the protagonist is, what the protagonist's sort of driving desire, underlying need, problem is. I got to know the beginning. I got to know the end. And I got to know the principal beats. And then, once you get the foundation laid, you start laying in the systems. You lay in the HVAC, the plumbing, the electrical, the ductwork, And you just start layering this stuff in. And sometimes in story terms, that might be deciding what's your main plot. Are you going to have subplots? Is there a B story, a C story, a D story? And brainstorming and laying that out. And then you start to put up the walls, the studs, and you just start writing the story. And I walk the fence between having to know every beat of the story and outlining. I only outline in the broadest ways possible, because for me, a lot of the story finds itself in the writing. When you're writing a book, and in some ways, you're sort of on a journey yourself of figuring out where the story's going to go.
Mhm.
Sometimes characters take on a life of their own and they do stuff that you didn't expect and sometimes don't want, but the story goes that way. But you still have to know the landmarks. You have to know your starting destination and your finishing destination, or at least I do. But I don't necessarily know every mile I'm going to take to get there. And you just layer it on. And then finally you finish the house, and then you go back and you do a thorough, complete ground to ceiling examination, and you develop what contractors call the punch list, which is all the errors and things you've got to fix. That's the rewriting process.
Do you ever have students who look like you've stabbed them in the heart when you say that?
Yeah.
I'd probably be one. I write out a sequence.
Oh.
I never outline.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
But then what I do is, and there's a book by Linda Seeger called Making a Good Script Great.
I love that book.
And she's terrific.
Yes.
And so I do that. I will have this big, I was trying, maybe it would be like having a snow fort and starting off with just a big glob.
Yeah.
You gather all the snow and you have this big glob, and then you start burrowing through it. And so you have to have structure. You absolutely have to. And I get there, but I don't start there.
And every writer's process is different. That's the other thing I tell my students, that every writer has to discover what works for them. The main point is it's got to work. And a lot of my students have never written very much. Some of them never written anything like creative writing. And I lay that out as one way to get started. But everybody's different. I know a couple of writers, Pat, I know a couple of writers who I respect, who are very good, but they can't write a screenplay or a novel until they figure out what their theme is.
Oh, gosh.
And that's the last thing I look at.
Yeah. That's usually a surprise to me when I'm editing.
Exactly.
Oh.
I don't discover what the theme of something is until the book's done.
Yeah.
But I know writer, and that it works for them.
Do you celebrate any point in the book? Do you celebrate starting or ending or having it come out? Or
I certainly celebrate finishing a manuscript. Yeah, that calls for a big glass of wine. When I was younger, Pat, when I sold my first novel, when I signed the contract and got the advance check, I took a bunch of people out for dinner, and man, we had a party. This is something I'd been trying to do for 15, 16, 17 years. And I mean, 3 couples, I took 6 of us out and probably blew $500 on dinner and dancing and drinks afterwards. And when my last book came out, I don't think I did anything.
Yeah.
After a while, it's a big deal when you're a younger writer. But I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and I said, I'm so far past, and I don't mean to sound cynical or arrogant or anything like that, but I'm so far past getting thrilled by seeing my name on a book or a byline on an article. And I told him, I said, the only thing I want to see my name on is a big fat damn check.
Maybe practical, huh? Maybe.
Yes, because if that check's fat enough, then I'll have the money to write the next book.
Well, this is a question I love, but no, I don't often get to it, but it segues into this. Can you think of what's the best money you have spent as a writer? Was it that dinner?
um, I really think back in the 90s and the early 2000s, before I had kids, before I taught full time, when I was really working the writing career hard, full time, I think the best money I spent in terms of learning and networking was going to conferences. I
Mm.
used to go to the NINK conference every year. I used to go to Bouchercon every year. I used to go to Magna Cum Murder every year, and that was money well spent. I made a lot of friends. I made a lot of connections. This is a people
Mhm.
business like any other one, and I learned a lot. So I think that was probably the best investment I made, and I'm looking forward to having the resources to do that again since I started entering this new, more current phase of my career where I'm independently publishing. I think the best money I've spent is realizing that you can't promote a book just by building a Facebook page, just by getting a Twitter account. You've got to put some money into marketing and promotion. You've got to get the word out there on your book because there's a lot of stuff out there.
I always think of it as a reader-author match. It can
Yes.
take time and money to find the good matches. And from a reader standpoint, it takes time and money too to find the authors who are good match for you.
To find the writers that you want to read their stuff and be a part of their work.
Okay, Steve, I have not asked you all the questions, and I will give you a shot if there is a question I haven't asked you that you would like to answer.
I think, Steve, what's your other passion besides writing and storytelling?
Oh,
What
okay.
else? What else consumes you? What else do you love? And for me, and I don't do it as much as I used to because I'm older and working full time and all that kind of stuff. But I'm a pilot, and I
Cool.
love flying. And in fact, I was in a partnership on an airplane once a long time ago. My first wife, one of our early dates, was I flew her to Kentucky for lunch in a Piper Cherokee,
Oh, that's
and
cool.
and I love flying, and I love traveling and adventure stuff, scuba diving and stuff like that. But I really the outside of publishing, writing, storytelling, the number one thing on my bucket list is I want to learn to fly an autogyro,
Oh my goodness.
which is a weird device that's just
Yeah,
they were very popular in the 20s and 30s, and then they went away, and now they're
for a
starting to come back.
reason, Steve.
Well, but do you know they're very popular in Europe because they're affordable to fly and very safe to fly. But an autogyro is half airplane, half helicopter. It has a rotor blade that's unpowered, and it has an engine that has a propeller that pushes the airplane fast enough to get the rotor spinning, and then it takes off. And these things go on YouTube.
And aren't they open? Am I thinking of the 1920s ones? Because I think of them as you're open to the elements.
It's open cockpit. Yes, most of them are open cockpit. You're just open to the elements. And they're low and slow most of the time. They'll only fly about 100 knots. And I would love to learn how to fly one of those.
Do you use flying in your books? Do you have characters who are pilots?
Do you know I have in a couple of unpublished books, but not in any that got published. I've got a number of unpublished novels in a filing cabinet in the garage.
So do you think you might bring those books out?
I might, yeah, yeah. I'd certainly like to revisit them. Some of them were written when I was very young.
I'm also immediately thinking flying lessons as a deductible expense or flying time as a deductible expense
As a deductible expense, yes.
for research.
Yeah, yeah. Back in the 80s, the 90s, my brother and I went to Freeport in the Bahamas and gambled for 3 days, and then I put a scene in a book of somebody gambling in the Bahamas, and that became a tax-deductible research trip.
Because we really need to know what those things are like. Are you listening?
Oh,
The IRS,
viscerally,
we do.
you've got
Yeah.
to know the noises and the smells and the
And the smells you cannot get through. YouTube or anything else. You have to be there.
Yes. You got to be there. It's research.
It is definitely research. So, okay, now we come to my very favorite part, which I think I say to everybody. Not that I don't enjoy the other parts, but it's rapid fire, either or. This is a test of your decision making. You ready?
Okay.
Pickup or sports car?
Sports car.
Hiking boots or cowboy boots?
Hiking boots.
Appetizer or dessert?
Appetizer.
Daisies or roses?
Roses.
Hot air balloon or train trip?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Hot air balloon.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Cat or dog?
Cat.
Binge watch or make the watching last as long as possible?
Make the watching last as long as possible.
Opera or show tunes?
Opera.
Paper plates or best china?
Ooh, best china.
House decorating or gardening?
Gardening.
Day or night?
Night.
Mustard or ketchup?
Mustard.
Winter Olympics or Summer Olympics?
Summer Olympics.
Ice cream or cake?
Ice cream.
Spring or fall?
Fall.
Cruise or trekking vacation?
Trekking.
Sailboat or motorboat?
Oh, sailboat.
This is the last one. Grab the best first or save the best for last?
Ooh, save the best for last.
Yay, Steve, you made it through the whole thing without waffling or breaking the rules. There are very few authors who have done that.
That was fun. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for being with us this week. And
Pat, this has been great fun.
Tell them about your podcast.
Oh, on my website, I just started a podcast. I've only done 2 episodes and, I have to work it in around my work schedule. But the podcast is called This Crazy Writing Life, and it's on my website, which is stevenwomack.com, www.stevenwomack.com. And there's a little button at the top that says blog podcast. Just hit that and you'll go right there. And if I get enough episodes to make it worthwhile to put it up with the big boys like yours, I'll do that. But right now, you just get it on my website.
And we will have URLs for folks for Steve's website and other social media. So that will all be there in the show notes. And hope everybody has a great week of reading and comes back next week to join us for another episode of Authors Love Readers. That's the show for this week. Hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for joining Authors Love Readers podcast. Remember, you can always find out more about our guest authors in the show notes, and you can find out more about me at www.patriciamclinn.com. You can also send in questions to be asked of future authors at podcast@authorslovereaders.com. Until next week, wishing you lots of happy reading. Bye.